ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another amazing episode of The Phone Booth, here at the voice of Stockton on KXVS Radio. My name is Ed Heitman, and joining me in the studio today is my good friend and co-host, Brian Rodriguez. How are you doing today, man?
Pretty good.
Good to hear. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with what our show is all about, The Phone Booth is a show completely dedicated to the world of pop culture. Anything from movies to TV shows to video games to comic books, you name it, and we do our very best to cover it. Now, I have to admit, I'm a bit bummed out this week. Usually, Brian and I will complain that it's a dead week when it comes to pop culture news. There are a lot of moments where absolutely nothing happens, but it seems this week lots of the worst things just could possibly happen, and we will get to that into our discussion pieces, but for now, let's enter our weekly recap. And in this segment, Brian and I will talk about some of the news that has come out in the world of pop culture within this week. So we're going to start off with some little quick bits that we don't really need too much discussion on before we jump into our main news bits. Starting off with the quick bits. Young Justice Season 3 premieres January 4th on the DC Universe. Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has been renewed for a 7th season, thank heavens, and THQ Nordic has announced their acquisition of Coffee Stain and Bugbear, the developers of Goat Simulator and Wreckfest, respectively. I also just like to mention that I loved the idea of Goat Simulator. Such a fun game.
It's pretty neat.
Such a fun game. Alright, so without further ado, let's jump into our main not discussion pieces. Let's jump into our main little news bits. In case you didn't hear, fans are excited for the upcoming project Godzilla vs. King Kong. It is a modern-day adaptation of the classic film, which pits the terror of Tokyo Godzilla up against the king of Skull Island himself, King Kong. Now, we heard a little bit of rumors floating around for the longest time about information on this movie, but we're happy to announce that production has finally began, and we even have a casting notice. It would seem that Lance Reddick, known for his roles in projects like Fringe, The Wire, and the John Wick movies, he has been officially cast for this upcoming film. And of course, we will keep you informed on any extra casting, as well as any other news regarding this project.
He actually isn't the first person cast for this. Millie Bobby Brown has also been announced to be reprising her role from the Godzilla King of the Monsters movie coming out next year, and Jessica Henwick of Game of Thrones and Iron Fist fame will be in the film in some role.
Yeah, well, thank you for correcting me on that one. I'm not very much informed on this project, but one thing I do have to say is that I am even more interested in this now that Lance Reddick is in it.
I love Lance Reddick.
He has always been that person that doesn't get talked about very often in shows like Entertainment Tonight and Hollywood Insider and stuff like that. But he's one of those actors to where, like, if he walks into a scene with a solemn expression, it's very often that the audience would just go quiet. Like, you just expect him to, you expect something from him, you know?
He is always the strongest presence in any scene he's in. He just has that natural charisma. And I think it's such a shame that he's not a bigger deal in Hollywood. He's always sort of a character actor. He's never been a star.
I know. Usually when he's in, usually in most projects that I see him in, he's always playing as the government agent, the head of a spy organization, a counselor, a president, or something like that. But I'm definitely excited to see his involvement in this project. I kind of have a feeling that his character, just knowing how he acts in other films, he might be heavily tied to the Monarch Project, which, as we've seen from trailers in King of the Monsters, is an organization that's known for keeping the secrets of arguably some of the biggest monsters in all the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I am excited about that. Anyways, I'll pass this next bit of news over to my good friend Brian.
So, last week, we talked about how Adi Shankar, the producer of the Netflix Castlevania series, was working on this secret new video game project. Well, it's not a secret anymore. He has officially announced that he is working on an animated Devil May Cry adaptation. Now, we don't know if this is also going to be on Netflix, but it is part of what Adi Shankar is calling the bootleg universe, which is actually encompasses the Castlevania Netflix series and a lot of his previous fan films. And really, it's not a cinematic universe like we're used to with Marvel or DC or this or that. It's really just centered around this man's, Adi Shankar's, love for all these projects. He loves them enough that he'd be willing to do, unofficial adaptations and things like Punisher Laundry Day or Power Rangers, to official adaptations like Castlevania and now Devil May Cry.
One thing that I definitely gotta say is that when it comes to video games that do good adaptations, Devil May Cry is a pretty good one. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, a lot of people didn't like the video game adaptation DMC because of the fact that Dante got replaced with a new version. However, Funimation, or either Funimation or Cookie Jar, I forget one of the two, they had an anime series for Devil May Cry, and it wasn't directly correlated to the main storyline. It was kind of like seeing Dante go on his little side adventures, hunting down demons and all that stuff. And it was just, I remember it being so much fun seeing him do these episodes, So the fact that another adaptation is in the works, I'm definitely excited for it, especially the fact that Adi Shankar is working on it. This guy, you could tell from any of his work that he clearly has a passion for the projects that he works on, So I'm really not worried at all about this project, I have high hopes. I already think that it's going to be a huge home run. I think it's going to be good.
Adi Shankar is a person where if you tie his name to it, a lot of passion and love is going into this project. Because he's a huge nerd like all of us, and he uses that to fuel his creations.
Yeah, he kind of has that same popularity that Steven Spielberg had for quite a while. Like when you saw that Steven Spielberg's name was tied into a project, you were immediately interested because you knew that it was going to be good because Steven Spielberg was working on it. And I'm kind of glad to see that kind of aesthetic is being applied to other creators as well. So I am definitely looking forward to this adaptation. And have we gotten any information as to when this project might be released or anything like that?
No, we don't know when, we don't know where, and I'm not 100% sure it's animated. All the news sites are saying it's animated, but Adi Shankar announced it by releasing a picture of an actual person dressed up as Dante, which hence maybe it's live action. I honestly don't know. We know it exists. We know it's happening. We just don't know how or when or where.
If it's a live-action version of Devil May Cry, I might be a bit cautious. I'm willing to give him the benefit of a doubt. But we're already kind of testing out how live-action video game adaptations are doing right now with the Witcher series on Netflix. We haven't gotten to see anything yet, but a lot of people are on edge seeing if this kind of a thing will really be a success. Because we had a lot of bad rep with video game movies in the past. Lots of them were just not good at all. But now that it seems like video games were meant for streaming services, they're meant to be turned into a long branching series instead of being compressed into a 1 or 2 hour movie. But
I think we might finally be entering the age of good video game adaptations, because for most of really video games' entire history, their film or TV adaptations have been really bad. But now with Castlevania, with The Witcher looking like it's probably going to be pretty good, and with a movie we'll be talking about in Trailer Talk coming up, it looks like we might finally be entering the good movies, good video game adaptations, which makes me really happy.
And I gotta say, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that. So on to the next little bit of news. This year, E3 was eventful.
Pretty big.
Yeah, pretty big, pretty good. While certain companies like EA, in my opinion, totally dropped the ball with Anthem being an exception, there were other companies out there that really brought it in for everybody. Good examples would be Sony, giving some really good examples such as The Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, and other things.
Sony was amazing.
Sony was amazing. And then we also had Bethesda, which leaked The Elder Scrolls 6 and Fallout 76, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
However, to everybody's surprise, it would seem as though Sony will not be in E3 2019.
Yep, the company announced for the first time in the 24 years of E3's existence, they will have no presence at the conference.
This is surprising to me, especially because of the fact that Sony was one of the companies that were responsible for E3 being created in the first place. I remember looking back at the history, and before there was E3, there was like a technology expo.
Yeah, it was for electronics, not electronic entertainment. It was, where people like Sony and Casio and Kodak, back when those were, big companies, they would show off their new products. And eventually, because of people like Sony and Nintendo, it sort of morphed into a video game-focused one.
It's just, the fact that they contribute so much to this, I find it odd that this time they want to step out, especially because of the fact that they did so well this year. I didn't really hear that many complaints at all from Sony. In fact, when it came to the Sony's Expo, most of the complaints I heard was the fact that a lot of the trailers should have been in the Square Enix Expo, but they decided to share them with other game companies before they even teased them themselves.
Yeah.
Now, there are a lot of speculations going around as to why Sony might be wanting to drop out on this next year's event.
And remember, this is all rumor. There's no confirmation for any of this. All we know is that Sony has confirmed they will not be at E3 2019, and they publicly canceled their PSX, the PlayStation Expo, for 2018, which was also a big, surprising move.
Definitely.
Going forward, that's all that's been confirmed.
Yep. And, again, there are a lot of rumors speculating, going around the place, as to why Sony decided to do all these moves. Now, of course, Brian and I, we have our own little assumption. This might be due to the fact that there is going to be another PlayStation console coming up real soon, hopefully, sometime in the future.
Yeah, the current rumor among all video game analysts, really, is that the PS5 is going to be releasing in 2020. The PS4 released in 2013, that's 7 years. That's about how long a game console's life cycle lasts, so that makes sense. We're also getting reports that certain development studios like Square Enix and others have started getting development kits for the PS5, and that the development kit is an absolute beast of a machine.
Mm-hmm.
And with all that combined, with them canceling their two biggest press events, right now what I'm thinking is essentially they've shown all they have for the rest of the PS4's launch cycle. They've got Days Gone, they've got Ghost of Tsushima, they've got Last of Us Part 2, they've got Death Stranding, and these are all going to be big games, but I think these are going to be sort of the final hurrah for the PS4. And right now Sony's sort of pulling back, they're not doing a lot of press, and sometime next year they're going to do a huge reveal event for the PS5.
Now, those of course are what we suspect might be the cause for Sony doing such a thing. But then again, I'm also a little skeptic about that as well, just because of the fact that there were a lot of really big name titles that they had shown off at E3, like you'd said, Brian. We got all those awesome titles. But some of them didn't really get nearly as much coverage as you would expect from a company before they just decide to not show anymore. We gotten at least 3 trailers of The Last of Us Part 2, which all of them were really good, in my honest opinion. However, there was a lot left to the imagination. And usually when it comes to really big blockbuster games, especially a Naughty Dog game, they usually have at least one trailer out there showing what the overall plot is. Now, other video games like Red Dead Redemption, they can get away with it because people are just really hooked on the franchise and they're banking on just people buying it because they're hooked over it. But with Naughty Dog, they've always wanted to show off the story to their video games. Uncharted 3 did this, Uncharted 4, Thieves' End did this, and I can only suspect that The Last of Us Part 2 would do it.
Of course, we don't know when The Last of Us Part 2 is coming out. We think it's sometime in 2019, but it probably won't be early 2019. It's probably going to be holiday 2019, maybe even 2020. So it's entirely possible they just aren't ready to start marketing it yet. They've shown us some stuff at E3, but it may just not be in a state where they're willing to say, hey, here's all the marketing material, because it's still at least a year away, probably.
Yeah, around that much. Still, it comes across as a total shock to everybody. We can expect something like this from a smaller branch. Like, I could expect Square Enix probably not wanting to show up to E3.
Especially not after last year.
Yeah, same applies to EA. They probably wouldn't want to show up just due to all the backlash that came from this most recent one. But a big league company just dropping out all of a sudden and canceling another one of their major events is a shocker. But if we hear any news as to an explanation for why this has happened, we will keep you guys well informed. Anyways, I'll pass this next little bit of news over to my good friend Brian.
So last week, actually, as we were doing our show, Microsoft held Expo 18 in Mexico City, which is essentially their version of PSX. It's an expo devoted entirely to the Xbox and upcoming Microsoft gaming ventures. And they announced a lot. They announced 2 studio acquisitions. They've acquired Obsidian Entertainment, developers of Pillars of Eternity 2, Fallout New Vegas, and South Park The Stick of Truth, this big, RPG developer, which is interesting. They also announced their acquisition of of In Exile, a group made up of former Interplay and BlackRock Studio developers who made the original Fallout titles, as well as a title called Wasteland, which they have actually been making sequels to in Wasteland 2 and Wasteland 3, both, again, very old-school RPGs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that Microsoft has acquired two studios sort of focused on the older style of RPG as compared to the newer style, which is more open world and things like that.
Yeah.
They also announced the Winter of Arcade, a sequel event to the old Summer of Arcade. We don't really know when it's going to be or what form it's going to take, but I like the old Summer of Arcade. It was a neat concept that I think brought a lot of, smaller titles up to the forefront. I believe Summer of Arcade brought us games like Trials, Mr. Explosion Man, things like that.
Those were good games, definitely.
Crackdown 3 has been given a release date of February 15th, 2019, and the original Crackdown is free on Xbox through the end of November. I still need to pick that up because I've heard it's a ton of fun.
Honestly, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to trust the release date for Crackdown 3. It's just been too many changes.
With the current rumors are that Microsoft has said you're going to release it whether it's finished or not because of all the delays, which doesn't inspire a ton of hope.
Yeah, we could just look at We Happy Few to see what happens with those kind of scenarios.
They announced an ensemble of Final Fantasy games will be coming to Xbox, including 7, 9, 10, 10-2, 12, and all three parts of 13. And 13 will actually be getting a graphical update and revamp of some of their cutscenes. Those will all be coming to Xbox One sometime in 2019, though I think 13 may be coming a bit earlier. And finally, most importantly, the showstopper of this event, Minecraft is getting pandas. Pandas are coming to Minecraft, and that's all I care about anymore.
Ah, man. That was the big reveal?
Yeah.
That was the big reveal.
Yes, it was.
It was the big reveal.
That was the most important part of that conference for me.
Okay, that was the milestone right there.
Pandas.
Now, before we jump into any other topics right now, I gotta let you have a little moment to rant right now about Final Fantasy, because all this news circulates around another recent announcement that has a lot of Final Fantasy 15 fans very upset.
Yes, so this last Thursday, I believe, Square Enix announced the next expansion for Final Fantasy XIV, currently their Final Fantasy MMO, will be coming in summer of 2019. And while last week we talked about the fact that Final Fantasy XV had 3 of its 4 DLCs cancelled, as well as its director leaving the studio. So it's leaves sort of a bitter taste in your mouth when just a week later they've announced this whole swath of resources being devoted to bringing older Final Fantasy titles to the Xbox One, including, graphical updates for 13, and then they announce an expansion pack for 14, and yes, I've realized that 14 is handled by a completely different studio. It's not in any way tied to 15, it's a different studio, different resources, things like that, I get that. But I feel like this all could have been handled better. They could have handled this so much better. You don't say, hey, we're canceling all this stuff for the current game, but here's a bunch of stuff for the older games. I mean, seriously, the resources devoted to bringing the older games to backwards compatibility, I feel like could have been diverted to actually making the DLCs you promised.
Especially the fact that one of the DLCs that had gotten canceled was going to revolve around the main character.
Yeah, right? Yeah, it was going to revolve around the main character. And this is just, as a fan of Final Fantasy 15, this is so aggravating. It's more than aggravating, it's infuriating. It just feels like a slap in the face. Yeah. And while I'm happy for all the Final Fantasy fans, Final Fantasy 14 players, this is great for you. For the fans of the older Final Fantasy games on Xbox, this is great. It's still extremely aggravating and disappointing.
It is aggravating. It is, and as somebody as somebody like myself, who's not a very avid Final Fantasy player, though I am a small-time fan of the series, I find it strange that instead of working on creating brand new content, especially the fact that you had all these DLC things planned for 15, you canceled all of that to do revamps and basically cluster packages of old school ones that people were already fine with. Honestly, when it comes to Final Fantasy Classics, I hear a lot of people talk about 7, 8, 10, 10-2, 13, things like that. But I never hear people say, God, I wish these games got a reboot. 7 being a major exception, because that one's been in reboot heck for aeons now, I just want to say.
Very much.
But the fact that you focused on all these clustered games, especially 13 in particular, because while I liked 13, even I noticed that a large portion of people in the Square Enix community did not like Final Fantasy 13 at all. They didn't like the game. Some people didn't like the gameplay. Some people didn't like the overly edgy storyline. That's in their opinions. And I even heard people have problems with the main character, while people loved Final Fantasy 15. I've always heard people have good opinions on Final Fantasy 15. They love the character, they love the story, they love the open world, and all that stuff. It's just, it's a strange direction. Like, I really wonder what happened to Square Enix that made everybody go, okay guys, drop these projects. We have to work on what we already have right now. Because, I don't know. Maybe this has something to do with E3 and the fact that they didn't really do too good with a lot of their major announcements, that they want to work on something that they already know people loved. After all, Final Fantasy in itself was supposed to be the final project of Squaresoft in itself. You know? So it's confusing. Anyways, on to the next little topic. For a while now, the CW's Arrowverse has had a very good reputation of giving little-known superheroes the spotlight that they deserve. We've seen a lot of characters get major episodes, major involvements, where people would normally be like, who is that person? But after watching the episode, they know very well who that superhero is, and if they saw them in a comic book, there's a very good chance that they would be able to recognize them. However, the CW's Arrowverse also has a very terrible reputation of being ridiculously vague towards the big-named heroes of the DC universe.
Okay, before we go on, I'm sorry, I also need to vent about this. Does Batman exist in the Prime Arrowverse where Green Arrow and the
Right?
Okay, because they have gone so close. They actually name-dropped Bruce Wayne in Season 6 by saying, oh, I couldn't possibly be the Green Arrow. I mean, do you see Bruce Wayne running around at night being a vigilante? No, so I couldn't possibly be the Green Arrow. Spoiler alert, he is. And then in the most recent episode, not to spoil anything, we see a character who is very commonly a Batman villain in prison, and she states she's there because of running into an old enemy in Gotham. Now that is pretty strong evidence of Batman. Plus, in some deleted scenes from Season 3, Harley Quinn is confirmed to be there. And
we've even gotten Batwoman coming up in the Elseworlds crossover.
Yeah, and we know Batman exists in the Supergirl universe, because there are they never name him directly, but there are some very obvious references to him. And we know Batwoman is coming from a third universe that has Batman. It's confirmed that Batman exists in that universe. So we have 3 potential universes with Batman, and we will never get to see him, will we? We're never going to get to see him. We'll just get these infuriating, old, vague references. Just let us see Batman.
Well, man.
Sorry.
Mellow out a bit? No, because I have good news. We are finally going to be seeing an iconic DC character coming up real soon, again, to be introduced into the DC universe, into the CW's Arrowverse in particular. However, it's not on the good side of, the superhero world. It has been confirmed that John Cryer, known mostly for his work as Alan in 2.5 Men, and for movie buffs out there, the Hot Shots series, he has been cast as the iconic villain to the super family, Lex Luthor himself. Now, one thing I gotta say is that I'm really glad that Lex Luthor is finally in here. I'm surprised that he wasn't in there at the very get-go, because whenever there was a super character, there was always Lex Luthor on the other hand. I don't know.
They actually had a good reason for it in Supergirl, in that when the show started, Lex was in prison because he'd just been in prison for doing...
Lex Luthor stuff.
Yeah, Lex Luthor stuff, basically. And we meet his sister, and we get references to him. We meet his mother. And now we're finally going to meet him. And I just want to say, when I first heard John Cryer was going to be playing him, I was really skeptical, because I know him as Alan, 2.5 Men, and Alan's really just sort of a weenie on the show.
He really is.
It brought me flashbacks of Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. And then I saw a picture of him with a shaved head and a beard, and I looked at him and went, wow, that is Lex Luthor. That is the Lex Luthor look.
Well, I mean, I'm willing to give him a shot, because when it comes to Lex Luthor, I've never really been picky on who plays as Lex Luthor. For me, it's always been, because he's never really been, like, my favorite DC villain. But he is a villain that I'm willing to see a storyline with him involved in. Though, I admit, I was kind of hoping that they would have cast the same actor who played as Lex Luthor in Smallville. Because that guy did a pretty good job as Lex Luthor, in my opinion.
Michael Rosenbaum. He is a very good Lex Luthor.
Very good Lex Luthor. His whole development into the role was amazing. But I can't let that get in the way of me accepting another person playing as Lex Luthor. And I know this is a very, very not too popular opinion. I liked Jesse Eisenberg's version of Lex Luthor, though I kind of felt like he would have done a better job as the Riddler, aside from Lex Luthor. But it was still a good one, and I'm willing to give it a shot if I ever come across to finally getting up to that point in time, because the Arrowverse is so freaking out there and diverse with so many episodes. But it's a good casting choice. I'd like to see him pull off the role eventually. Anyways, I'll pass this next little bit of news over to my good friend Brian.
Now for the video game series I love the most but will never play. Five Nights at Freddy's.
Didn't know you were a fan of that series, man.
I love the lore. I don't like scary games, but I love the lore, so I've never actually played a game. But anyway, Scott Cawthon, the creator of the FNAF franchise, has given an update on its future. First of all, in regards to the movie that's been in development for what seems like an eternity, it has apparently been delayed again because despite Jason Blum, the head of Blumhouse, and Christopher Columbus, the director of the movie, both liking the script, Scott Cawthon didn't, threw it out, and rewrote it. So that's another delay to the movie, and I gotta say, Jason Blum must love getting the rights to this franchise. He just must love what's happening right now. You've got a creator that just constantly throws out scripts and refuses to let you start production on your movie. That has to be the dream for a studio executive.
Honestly, with Jason Blum, I noticed that he has kind of a strategy when it comes to these kind of movies. He basically, from what I've noticed, from his track record of movies that he's funded and everything, he'll throw, decent amounts of money, not humongous blockbuster amounts, but decent enough to get a movie made, to just about anybody who's willing to pitch a horror script to him. We got in the Slender Man movie, we got Happy Death Day, we got Would You Rather, but then we also got some major successes, such as the new Halloween movie that has come out, and other films like that. He's really a hit-or-miss person, and I can see why he wanted to fund the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, because he knows that is a hit-or-miss opportunity. Mm-hmm. Either it will flop in the box office and he can still recover because there wasn't that much money spent, or it will be a huge success and he'll make good bank off of it, and it is a wise little investment.
Yeah, and he also, Scott Cawthon also revealed a few important details about the movie. First of all, he refers to it as the first movie, which shows that he may have plans for more movies if this one does well. Second of all, the movie will only be canon to the first 3 games of the franchise, which is a really good idea, because starting with Five Nights at Freddy's 4, the lore got really complicated. You've got ghost children, you've got robots, you've got the Bite of 83 and the Bite of 87. There are 2 different purple guys.
There was another Bite.
Yeah, there was the Bite of 83 and the Bite of 87, and there's been a lot of debate about which one's which and which one killed which character. Not even going to get into that right now.
We don't have enough time to cover the Five Nights at Freddy's lore.
Anyway, it's going to stick to being canon to the first 3 games, which were much simpler. Animatronics taken over by ghost children trying to kill the guy that murdered them. Makes sense. Fairly simple. He also revealed he has 4 different Five Nights at Freddy's games in development right now. He has a VR game, which he says is about 40% complete, an AR game he says is about 10% complete, a sequel to, a proper sequel to the franchise that he said he hasn't really started work on yet, and a planned AAA game in the franchise.
Now, for those people out there who are unfamiliar with the term, would you mind explaining what AAA means?
AAA is typically your giant blockbuster game worked on by huge studios. It's your Red Dead Redemption 2, it's your Assassin's Creed Odyssey, it's your Destiny, it's your GTA,
it's your Last of Us Part 2.
Yeah, it's the big AAA games. They're like the Marvel movies or the big blockbusters of the gaming industry. They're the ones that, always make $1 billion or die trying.
Mm-hmm. Now, I gotta say, I'm honestly surprised that there's all this stuff being worked on at Five Nights at Freddy's. Because, honestly, when I first heard about the game, I wasn't really too invested in it. I saw the gameplay footage and it looked fun, but it looked like one of those games that you would get scared the first couple of times of playing, and then afterwards you would kind of get over it. And I was honestly amazed when I saw all this stuff constantly being created for it. Sequels, there was extended lore all of a sudden, there was books being made for Five Nights at Freddy's. My little brother's obsessed with the franchise, So I'm surprised that not only is there a movie in production, well, I'm not really too surprised because that was already announced a while back, but I'm surprised that there's even more stuff being worked on.
Oh, I'm not even done yet.
Oh.
I'm not even done yet. He is currently working on console ports of all the other games that came before it. Well, maybe not FNAF World, because no one likes to talk about that. He's also working on a second series of books.
Ugh.
And it's just, for those of you that know, the games and the books take place in two separate but sort of mirrored universes. So events from the games inform events in the books, and events in the books inform events in the games. It's unclear if this new book series will take place in the same universe as the books, the same universe as the game, a third universe that will inform both of the others. This man is insane.
You know what, though? I can't blame the guy. The guy did a lot of projects, a lot of hit-or-miss things. And Five Nights at Freddy's seems to be one of those few projects that was a humongous success.
It was.
And honestly, if I was a video game publisher, and I had a lot of bad projects that just failed, and I happened to come across one golden egg that just everybody seemed to love, I would probably milk the heck out of it. I would just do as much as I can. A very, very obvious example, actually, we already mentioned it, is the Final Fantasy series. When the first Final Fantasy game was made, it was supposed to be the end of Squaresoft. It was their Final Fantasy. That's what the name.
Yep.
That's what the name meant. But people loved it. So then we got a second one, and then a third one, and a fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, a whole bunch of spin-offs. We got a whole bunch of extensions to the original numbers. We got books. We got movies. We got everything. It's no different than what Five Nights at Freddy's is doing. The guy found a success, and he wants to see how far he can go.
Yeah, and with the exception of FNAF World, all the games have been really well received. Let's see, there's 1 through 4, there was Sister Location, there was Pizza Simulator, and then there was Ultimate Custom Night. So that's 8 games. Only one of them is really considered to be the bad one, and even that one he went back to work on it to make it better. Mm-hmm. There's a series of books that have been received, at least. I don't know if you can really put well, but received, at least. There's a movie, and it's... Five Nights at Freddy's came out in 2014. It came out 4 years ago, but it feels like it's been at least a decade.
Yeah. So, you know what? Props to you, man. Mm-hmm. I ain't even gonna hate. You got success, and you're seeing how far it can go. I would do the exact same thing. I'm sure Brian would do the exact same thing as well.
Definitely.
So, a lot of respect to you. On to the next little topic. Over time, in the world of pop culture, we have seen a large number of what we can only refer to as cinematic universes. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with that term, a cinematic universe is a series of movies all pertaining around a particular subject or topic or brand that are all intertwined together eventually. The most obvious examples that we have right now are the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the DC Cinematic Universe, where we have all these separate films, and then eventually we have like major blockbusters like Avengers and Justice League to tie them all together. We also have smaller universes. We have the Sony's Marvel Universe, which recently has Venom, and they're working on other titles as well. And then we also have the Dark Universe, which I will not accept the fact that it is dead. It is alive. It is alive. It is just in hiding, and eventually it'll come back out, and I am looking forward to that fateful day.
Maybe it's like the Mummy. It's dead now, but it'll be alive again.
You know what? I like that. I like that, and I will believe that. However, it would seem as though there is a new cinematic universe potentially on the rise that will blow everybody away.
Oh, God.
Major blockbuster success, lots of Oscars, everything, best performance, most popular best picture of all time, and that would be the General Mills universe.
Okay, so I feel like I need to give context here because I feel like I die inside every time he says it. So General Mills has recently put out a call for filmmakers to submit scripts to them for films based on their iconic characters such as Count Chocula, Frankenberry, Boo Berry. You know, I never said them out loud right now. There's a lot of berries in there. Ed's currently dying, so I'm just going to keep going. And it's just... We don't know if they want to make it a cinematic universe. We've just been calling it that because it's by far the least ridiculous part of this entire thing. They want to make films based on cereal mascots. That's where we've reached at a point. I thought Battleship was as far as we could sink. I thought Battleship was as far as we could sink 6 years ago. And now we're going with cereal mascots, okay? Cereal mascots! I don't want to see a Count Chocula movie. No one wants that because it's stupid. It's a stupid idea. And not only that, they're not even working on scripts in-house. They're asking scriptwriters and filmmakers to write their own scripts and submit them to them for review. They think people will actually waste their time writing a General Mills Count Chocula. I don't know what it will take. Will it be animated? Will it be live action? Will it be horror? Who knows? It's
God.
Count Chocula. We're in uncharted territory here. But they think there are screenwriters with so little self-respect they will waste their time writing a script for this that may not even get approved. And I know there are some out there. I know LA is a hard place, but it's just, what is this? What is happening? What is happening to us as civilization? What is happening?
I have heard of a huge number of cinematic universes out there that have piqued my interest. I mean, I know that even Hasbro has intentions of potentially making a cinematic universe with their figurines, He-Man, Thundercats, so on and so forth. But General Mills, like, at one point in time, did they, like, sit there and was like, you know what we should do? We should really make a cinematic universe for our characters. I'm expecting, like, 3 or 4 years from now, I'm imagining, like, this humongous crossover movie where we have, like, the Breakfast Avengers. We'll have, like, the Trix Rabbit. We'll have the Lucky Charms dude. We'll have the Crazy Bird who's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. We're gonna have it all. And it's going to be a major thing. And their main enemy is probably going to be, like, Hostess or something like that. General Mills, though, and the fact that they're not even going out asking people for scripts, they're expecting people to bring the scripts into them. Like, who do you expect to wake up one day in the morning, drinking their coffee, looking out, seeing the skylines, like, you know what I should do? I should write a gritty neo-noir film for the Cocoa Puffs bird.
Okay, Microsoft couldn't pull this bull with Halo in 2007 at the franchise's peak. General Mills cannot do this at all. You are not Halo at its peak. You are Frankenberry.
You are Frankenberry, and deal with it, yo. My God.
I hate everything.
Well, anyways, I need to catch my breath, so I'm gonna pass this little next bit of news over to you, man.
Okay. So, we've talked a lot about the entire saga of Telltale on this show.
An eventful one.
Yeah, and it looks like we are finally reaching sort of a conclusion to it. And, of course, it's not a happy one. Telltale has filed for bankruptcy. Which
was expected, honestly.
Yeah, but it's finally happened. They are liquidating their assets, including physical assets, like, their offices, their furniture, things like that. But also their digital assets, their games. Several of their older games, such as Back to the Future, Jurassic Park, have been pulled off of sites like Steam, GOG. They're no longer for sale. Things like The Walking Dead and pretty much everything past that are still up there, probably because that's, those still make some money, but I wouldn't be surprised if those go down for a while too until whoever the new owners are put them back up, or maybe they're gone. I don't know. Also, it has been announced that they are ceasing their Cobra payments for their ex-employees, Cobra being a insurance service. And it's just, I don't know. I feel like I'm out of outrage over this. I'm out of anger. I'm out of hatred. I'm just sort of resigned.
Honestly, man, the story of Telltale Games is a sad tale to tell, ironically. And it kind of bums me out that a lot of these they're minor projects, are being pulled, liquidated. I myself was one of the few people who really, really loved the Back to the Future Telltale game. I only got to play a little bit because I was one of those people who couldn't buy the extra episodes. I was hoping that I would get them for free and stuff like that. But there was these smaller titles that I'm sure that there were people who loved them and that they disappeared. And it's just one thing to add onto the top of the humongous pile that is just everything that has been going wrong for Telltale within this last handful of months. However, I can't get too upset over it, like you said. I've kind of become desensitized to the whole thing with Telltale. It's like every time I hear news bits, it's like people who get tired of watching the news. You see bad news constantly that you don't feel it anymore. All I can say is that I hope that the employees of Telltale find very respectable careers. I know that when Telltale first announced that they were shutting down, game companies all around Telltale were doing their best to bring employees in because they realized that this was people's lives. It was their paychecks. It was how they paid for their house, for their food, roof over their heads, and things like that.
Yeah, and there is some good news for The Walking Dead fans. Robert Kirkman, The Walking Dead's creator, his entertainment company Skybound has taken over the finishing of the production for the final season of The Walking Dead, and they are actively trying to work with former employees that worked on the project to finish it. They're not just hiring a completely new team, they are trying to put the original team that worked on it back on it.
Yeah.
Which is great.
It is great, honestly. But again, like I said, the story of Telltale is a sad tale to tell. It really is a bummer that all this just started happening because it blew me out the water. I didn't know about the crunch time happening with the studio. I honestly didn't know that it wasn't doing as good. I was one of those people who were under the assumption that Telltale was doing fine. And then all this just happened. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that about does it for today's little episode of today's weekly recap. So now it's time for us to enter the little segment that we like to call Trailer Talk. And in this segment, Brian and I like to talk about some of the latest trailers to drop within the week. And without further ado, let us dive right into it. Now, the first trailer that we have to talk about is a very important one, to be honest. A very special one.
We referenced it a little earlier.
A little bit, yes. And this is the first trailer for the Detective Pikachu trailer. I mean, the movie. Its release date is May 10th, 2019. Starring Ryan Reynolds, Justice Smith, and others. The synopsis is that in a world where people collect pocket-sized monsters, Pokemon, in case you didn't know, that was actually what the name meant this entire time. To do battle, a boy comes across an intelligent monster who seeks to be a detective. And that monster, because for some reason they were very vague about these details, is a Pikachu.
Yeah.
Voiced by Ryan Reynolds. Very good job, I have to say. Now, there are two things that I'd like to mention with this trailer. The first one is that I'm amazed at how perfect the world looks in this trailer. When I first heard about Detective Pikachu, I thought it was going to be like Brian was talking to me about earlier, just like the trailers for the Pokemon games that are shown live action. It's just, they're there. Regular world, but they're there.
Yeah, they're the 3D sprites from the game, polished up and just plonked in the real world. They look like animated characters in the real world. In this movie, the Pokemon look like you would expect them to look in real life.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing and terrifying in some aspects.
Oh yeah, that is definitely true. There are certain, the Pokemon definitely look very different now that they look more realistic. Pikachu actually has hair instead of just being a little pink mouse, a little yellow mouse, sorry.
It's very fluffy.
Jigglypuff has hair, and a lot of people have mixed reactions about that. Charizard looks like an actual dragon, and he actually looks terrifying.
Yeah, it looks like how a 10-foot-tall, 2-ton fire-breathing dragon would look in real life.
Yeah, and then we also got to see some Greninjas, and even they looked amazing, moving around like some sort of a Shadow Ops unit and things like that. And overall, I'm genuinely excited about this movie. It blew away my expectations. I have to confess, I thought this movie was going to be bad. I thought that this was going to be a flop because Nintendo just cannot seem to get a good movie most of the time. The last Nintendo movie I can honestly think of was the Super Mario Brothers movie from a long time ago.
They locked it down after that disaster.
Which is unfortunate because we almost had gotten a live-action Metroid film if the Mario Brothers movie didn't screw up so badly.
Yeah.
But this is the first time in a very long time that Nintendo's actually making a movie, and this one looks amazing. I'm surprised that they're even testing the waters with live action, seeing as they made the smart move and let Illumination do a animated Mario movie sometime in the future. I don't like the fact that it's Illumination, but I love the fact that it's animated this time. Another thing that I'd like to say is that, and this is regarding another trailer we're going to talk about, this is one of the few movies that somehow managed to blow Disney right out the water.
Yeah.
Right out the water. You see, another trailer we're going to be talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is the trailer to the 4th installment of the Toy Story series. And while they expected the trailer to drop and people get really excited about it, Detective Pikachu just beat them.
Yeah,
they beat them.
Dropped it on the same day. I think within a few hours of each other. I think Detective Pikachu got there first, and they just absolutely eclipsed the teaser trailer for Toy Story 4. And you actually have a story about that I know you'd love to tell.
Yes, yes. They dropped the trailer to Toy Story 4 that we'll talk about because there's not really much in the trailer to talk about anyway. It's like a brief few seconds. Then shortly afterwards, we get a reaction trailer. I say that in air quotes because it's not even a genuine reaction. We just got an extra trailer showing off two new characters, Bunny and Ducky, played by the iconic comedic duo Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele. They're basically just talking about Toy Story 4. They're making another one. Oh my god! And this, of course, was done after the Detective Pikachu trailer. Because then you realize, for the first time in a very long time, we have found something that can actually overshadow Disney. A feat that I thought was impossible. The production company that can never die has been eclipsed by the video game company that can never die.
Yeah.
It's amazing, man.
It looks like Nintendo's mouse was super effective against Disney's. And with that joke, I will leave.
I love it. I love it.
I'm leaving, bringing the microphone with me.
Okay.
If this joke doesn't work, I'm going back. Why did I do this? I'm very tired.
Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, we do have to talk about the trailer to Toy Story 4. Of course, this is just going to be more about discussion and speculation over it. Now, of course, the release date that we gotten for Toy Story 4 was June 21st, 2019. Though the trailer itself, I believe, said just 2019. This is starring... No, I'm sorry. June 21st, 2019. I got the numbers mixed. Starring Tom Hanks, Tim Allen, Patricia Arquette, and others.
So many others.
Yes. And the synopsis is that Woody and Buzz embark on a quest to find Woody's romantic interest, Bo Peep. And this is directed by Josh Cooley. Why? I'm sorry. I know that's usually not something to open up with a discussion piece about a trailer, but...
But that's sort of our reaction to not just this trailer, not just what they did with the trailers, but sort of this movie's very existence.
Because you see, with Toy Story 3, in case you didn't get the opportunity to watch Toy Story 3, everybody loved it because it wrapped up the story of Woody and Andy so perfectly. Mm-hmm. You were happy with how things ended. I couldn't think of anybody who said, we want another. Though there, of course, there are always going to be people who said they want another because pop culture the way it is. But there were tons of people, myself included, it was like, I'm fine with them never making another Toy Story if that's the case. Yep. This ended so well. I don't want it to get bashed or ruined. If you make like a short or something, fine. I'm fine with a short. But with this movie, you completely botched the feeling of the ending.
Yeah.
Because with the fourth installment now, it feels like the story is no longer complete. It feels like it's just going to keep going now. Like the focus is no longer going to be about Woody and his owner. It's going to be some random plots thrown in there just because they know that people love Toy Story. And I can't really be excited about it. Honestly, I'm a little angry about it. I didn't want them to make another Toy Story. It was one of my favorite Disney movies of all time, is Toy Story. And I was happy with it, you know? So it's a bummer that they had to make a fourth installment. Though I'll give it a shot just because I love the actors. I also like the idea of Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele being in a Toy Story movie. They've been getting a lot of work lately due to the success of their Comedy Central show, Key and Peele, and I am glad that they're getting all this success. Mm-hmm. It's just, I kind of wish that Disney and Pixar would just let Toy Story end. It was a good ending. We would have been fine with, I even would have been fine with, a spin-off taking place after the events of Toy Story. Even with new toys or something. I don't care, but Woody and Buzz kind of had their run. They were happy with where they are. I don't know.
Yeah, there's also a B-plot to this movie that's really dark. So Bonnie, the toy's new owner, has created her own little toy out of a spork and some pipe cleaners called Forky, voiced by Tony Hale of Veep and Arrested Development fame. And Forky's story is, he doesn't want to be a toy. He was fine just being a spork. And it's this really dark thing. He has this existential crisis of being this inanimate object and suddenly being alive because he's been made a toy. And he doesn't want to be a toy. He just wants to go back and be a spork, which is really, really dark.
It is dark, but it also kind of correlates to the theories that people already had about Toy Story anyways. We're like, if the toys could be animated and brought to life, what else in the houses can see and speak and talk and everything? Robot Chicken even did a perfect sketch of this, where like the kid found out that the toys could talk, then he found out that the walls could talk, and the bed and the trash can and the computers and all this stuff. And it's weird that now you actually have to consider that with the Toy Story movies.
Yeah, the first trailer ends with Forky screaming, "I'm not a toy, I'm not supposed to be here." Which is, I mean, Toy Story 3, and really all the Toy Story movies have had really dark moments in them, and they've dealt with some heavy subject matter. So I'm not going to say it's out of character for the movies, but it's still really dark when you have, of course, a character questioning whether they should be alive and deciding they don't want to be.
Yeah, and it makes the other movies so much darker, knowing that inanimate things could be alive aside from toys, especially knowing the landfill scene from the third movie.
Mm-hmm.
Why? I have to wrap it up with that. Why? Just why?
Just why.
Anyways, on to the next trailer. I didn't get to see this one myself. I'll let Brian talk about it, but of course this is the second trailer for the live-action Dumbo movie.
Okay, I'm going to be honest with you. Didn't like this trailer. Like, at all. And I've sort of been apathetic about the Dumbo movie, but this trailer made me actively dislike it. So, the entire focus of the trailer is basically, Dumbo is born, some kids discover he has the ability to fly with his ears, and the shady circus owner, played by Danny DeVito, who will probably be the best part of this movie, because he's Danny DeVito.
Yeah.
It decides to sell him to this big amusement park company, or some, I'm not quite sure. My first complaint is that the kid that plays the little girl is not a great actor. For most of the trailer, she shows absolutely no facial expression. And this isn't a complaint that she should smile more or that she looks gloomy. She has no expression whatsoever. There is no inflection in her voice. She seems like she's phoning this entire performance in.
Okay, well, in defense of that, though, I mean, it's kind of just been a known reputation that child actors usually aren't very good actors.
But there are some really great child actors out there, and it feels like Disney, with all the money they're pouring into this, could have found a better child actor. And maybe it's just in these scenes, maybe they just a few bad scenes, maybe they'll do retakes before the movie comes out. I don't.
Reasonable.
But overall, this movie just feels unnecessary. It just feels like it doesn't need to exist. Like a lot of the current live-action remakes of old Disney properties, it just feels unnecessary. And we know they're going to be changing some things. I don't think Jiminy Cricket's going to be in the movie.
Jiminy Cricket was Pinocchio.
Yeah, what was the name of the guy in that? Don't even remember his name. We also know they're removing the Jim Crows, which, thank goodness.
Good.
Because watching those scenes, you sort of forget how racist Walt Disney could be.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable, really.
It really is.
Now, one thing that I do want to note about the Dumbo movie that did catch my interest, the only thing that has caught my interest so far regarding this, is the fact that it's going to be handled by none other than the legendary filmmaker himself, Tim Burton.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in case you guys aren't too familiar with if you're not too familiar with filmmakers and whatnot, Tim Burton is responsible for a lot of the best, I want to say, gothic animatronic films out there. He worked behind The Nightmare Before Christmas, The Corpse Bride. I believe he worked on Paranorman.
I don't know if he worked on Paranorman.
No, not Paranorman. Frankenweenie.
That was it.
Frankenweenie. Yeah, it's weird. Out of all the movies that he would work on, especially adaptations nonetheless, I never thought I would see Tim Burton work on a Dumbo movie.
And it is kind of odd for him because Tim Burton, he's sort of cast as this creepy kids director. I don't think he's creepy. I think if you look at a lot of films, he takes the concept of death and adds a bit of whimsy to it. Like with The Corpse Bride and Frankenweenie and even The Nightmare Before Christmas, he sort of takes the fear out of death.
That's what I was thinking too. Tim Burton has this amazing reputation for taking things that would normally terrify the daylights out of a kid, give them nightmares forever, and somehow work it into his movies to where the kids are no longer afraid of it, and they can also somehow tolerate somewhere around that level of gothicness, I want to say.
Yeah.
It's where, like, he helps kids not... He's one of those directors that can make a kid not scared of the dark, I want to say. Because you'd be... if a kid would be terrified of monsters, would watch Tim Burton movies, all of a sudden, they might not be too scared of monsters anymore.
He takes sort of those primal fears of death and the dark and shows them to kids and sort of pulls back the curtain on them. Which I think is good. But it's also... Dumbo, the movie's very stylized. It's not really that gothic. It's not really... And it's interesting that he's working on this.
Yeah. I find it odd as well. I kind of feel like this might be like a contractual kind of thing.
Maybe.
Like maybe he had made a previous deal a while back and then just kind of went around to nip him in the butt later on. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, if you are interested in catching the Dumbo movie when it comes out, its release date is March 29th, 2019. It's starring Ava Green, Colin Farrell, Michael Keaton, Danny DeVito, and many others. Now, that about does it for trailer talk, ladies and gentlemen. And now we enter our discussion piece, which I'm honestly not really looking forward to talking about, to be honest. So, Brian, would you mind handling this?
So, something we didn't talk about in the news because we felt it deserved a bit more of this is that on Monday, comic book icon Stan Lee passed away. And he was 95 at the time. He lived a long and good life, but it is still a sad moment for a lot of people because Stan Lee is probably one of the greatest creators of American mythology.
Of all time.
Yeah, and American mythology is sort of hard to pin down because we create a lot of characters that sort of, go by the wayside. We don't have the Greek myths or the European fairy tales, but we do have some characters. We've got our superheroes.
Now, in case you're a small portion of people who are unfamiliar with who he is, Stan Lee he's most well known for his contribution to Marvel Comics, especially during the golden age of superheroes. He helped bring us various heroes such as the Fantastic Four, the first superhero family, the Incredible Hulk, and the Amazing Spider-Man, which is something that he actually had to fight for to get it well known in Marvel comic books.
Another character he helped create was Black Panther, another character he had to fight really hard for because at the time during the 60s, the term Black Panther was
controversial.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah.
And it's amazing he fought for this representation of what at that point were sometimes villainized minorities in comics and showing that they were human like the rest of us.
That's one thing. He helped create more humanized superheroes. Black Panther, because there wasn't very that often minority superheroes around the golden age of comic books. So Stan Lee definitely helped contribute with that. And then also with Spider-Man, around that time, it didn't really feel like there were too many superheroes who was the average Joe. They would be like people who go out there and fight universal threats, humongous superheroes with mega powers. Spider-Man was one of the very first superheroes who focused on helping his city. He handled small-time crimes. He was the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, things like that.
And I think that sort of dictates a lot of what Stan Lee's work was, is that while other people made, these godlike super beings or superheroes, Stan Lee took ordinary people that weren't born with powers, but got given them through accident, through choice, through things like that, and made them superheroes. He made the ordinary extraordinary instead of just creating the extraordinary.
He helped create the iconic line, "With great power comes great responsibility." Now, outside of Marvel Comics, he has contributed to about every facet of pop culture out there. Even DC has acknowledged that Stan Lee had helped inspire people when working in comic books. Filmmakers, people who worked in television, people who do YouTube videos. Everybody has mentioned Stan Lee in some form of inspiration when it comes to pop culture. And for those of you who never really got to read the comic books that Stan Lee had worked on, you might recognize him for his constant cameos in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It was like a tradition. Mm-hmm. Every Marvel movie that came out, Stan Lee had to be in there somewhere. He was Stan the Man. Mm-hmm. You couldn't do a Marvel movie without Stan Lee in it. And then also recently, Stan Lee was getting a comic book series with himself included in it, Stan Lee's Workforce, which was him and a bunch of superheroes working on comic books and things like that. And it was just fun. He was always such a fun person. But at the end of the day, all I can really say is the man got to live a full life and died a legend.
He lived an amazing life. He created so much. And honestly, personally, I don't think I would be sitting right here if it weren't for him and his characters. I don't think I would be as into pop culture, as into superheroes, as into all this if it weren't for Stan Lee and his work and his legacy.
Likewise, I wouldn't be here. When I was a kid, not many movies caught my attention. Around that time, I admit I had a bit of a small attention span. So I wasn't really interested in like noirs or action thrillers or things like that. But then I remember the very first time I saw the Spider-Man movie. And before that, even before all of that, my very first comic book. A long, long time ago, I was in first grade, down by Lottie Grunsky, down there. And I lived with my grandma. My mom was very busy. She always worked and everything. But then one day she came in and said, "Ed, I have a surprise for you. You're going to love it." She came in with this humongous tote. And it was flooded with nothing but golden and silver age Spider-Man comic books. It even had a graphic novel involving Spider-Man and Venom and everything. And I remember falling in love with all this stuff. And ever since then, I was hooked on superheroes. Spider-Man in particular. My two favorite heroes of all time were always Spider-Man and Superman. And slowly it helped me slowly evolve into other forms of pop culture that I got interested in. So I have to agree, without Stan Lee, I can't really say that I would be here right now doing a show about pop culture. And I'm sure a lot of people out there who do shows about pop culture can say the very same. Mm-hmm. He put inspiration in people, and he still does. He kind of gave off this message that you don't need to be the most interesting person in the world to be a superhero, to do great things. Anybody could be born with the potential to do something great. It all depends on what's in your heart and your motivation and your drive and all that. So it's safe to say that the world of pop culture is pretty silent at the moment because we're all paying respects to a man who undoubtedly shaped the entire world of pop culture in the way it is now. So I have to, of course, before wrapping up the show, I just had to say, rest in peace, Stan Lee. You were a legend and an inspiration to us all.
Enough said.
Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of today's episode of The Phone Booth here at the Voice of Stockton on KXVS Radio. My name is Ed Heitman, and joining me in the studio today is my good friend and co-host, Brian Rodriguez. Be sure to tune in every Saturday from 1 to 2, where we talk about anything pop culture related. Anything from movies to video games, TV shows, comic books, you name it, and we do our very best to cover it. Now, be sure to stick around and check out some of the other shows that we have. There's some good stuff here at KXVS. And without further ado, please have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.